Part 8. RK equals. GNN Studio. Coruscant. Good morning, Coruscant. Borsk Tonfa greeted cheerfully. I'm glad to inform you that finally the situation on the capital of the Republic is calming down. Security forces and military units are dissipating the last pockets of crime gone out of control and die-hard rioters. Meanwhile, across large tracts of the capital, people are busy taking stock of the damages incurred, which are estimated to be in the billions of credits. After he was done with the local news, Borsk went for the standard morning overview of the night's events across the galaxy. The Separatists committed more acts of piracy across the sectors close to Corellia. In response, Republic battle groups and local system defense forces are on the hunt. We will have more information on convoys' hits early in the afternoon. The main Separatists' forces continue to fortify Corellia and the other systems upon the main trade lanes in preparation for a massive Republic counterattack that every knows is coming soon, and fortunately otherwise the core has been calm last night. Borks paused and took a sip of water while the hollow images around him showing the core shifted to show the eastern part of the galaxy. Heavy fighting continues throughout the eastern parts of the mid-rim. Tonfa was halfway through listing planets and systems won and lost during the night, when he got a message that an unexpected interview was done and ready for broadcast. He smiled when he got the heads up. He knew Victoria would get the job done. I must interrupt this part of Galaxy at war for a special treat, Borsk exclaimed. Late last night, our own Victoria Halcyon was offered an exclusive interview with a woman we had on our network some time ago, one Dr. Zash, a Sith scientist who survived from the old Republic times. It seems there was more to her than meets the eye. She had spent the last few months recovering after an assassination attempt carried by no other but Jedi Master Yoda, the discarded Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Until now, his fate in the aftermath of the Jedi coup was unknown. However, now we not only have a security recording of part of his fight with Dr. Zash, but an interview with the woman herself. I bring you Victoria RK equals. The striking red-haired woman smiled wishfully. Whose truth? Mine. Yours? The Jedi's? Or the actual truth? All I can give you is my truth, Victoria. Zash spoke in a gripping tone that demanded attention. A faraway look entered her eyes and she began her story. Do you know what I learned on my father's knee as a wee little lass? Our kind had been in seclusion for almost 1,000 years. For my father and his friends, the galaxy at large was the stuff of myths and legends. Their world was the 100-star system controlled by the Sith Empire. Then the Jedi and the Republic came. They drove our people to the farthest fringes of the galaxy, showing no mercy nor regret in their pursuit to exterminate us. Her smile became sad and her voice, it sounded as if she sang a funeral dirge that plucked strings in the hearts of trillions across the galaxy who watched the broadcast. Do you know what I know of my mother? There are only impressions, warm sun upon my skin, her soft hands holding me and the scent of her favorite perfume, of fruits that had been extinct for 5,000 years after the Jedi burned our home to the bedrock. Smell, touch and the color of her eyes, that's all that I recall. If it wasn't for my father keeping a medallion with her image always close to his heart, I would have never seen her face. Victoria swallowed a lump that formed in her throat and finally spoke when Zash paused. While that is certainly a moving story, how is that relevant for what is happening right now? What does it have to do with General Vale's actions? To understand him, to understand why he did what you all accuse him of, you must know where he came from. What made him the man you all knew and what drove him to such lengths? Zash's voice was enchanting. It demanded attention and Victoria found herself nodding eagerly. She wanted to hear more of that story, a sentiment shared by billions across the galaxy. Then please explain. From what I remember from ancient history, the Republic only entered that war to protect the Jedi. That certainly differs from your account. Halcyon prompted. She had to hear more. Of course it does, dear. The Republic, the Jedi, they won that war. They were around to write the history books. Put that way. It sounded so simple, so reasonable, and it raised so many questions that Victoria was eager to dig into. Do you know what my father would have done to experience the simple pleasure of having my mother beside him again? Do you know what I would do if I could meet her for just a moment? Zash's gaze hardened. We would have done everything. It would be worth anything. An impossible dream, one shared by everyone who has lost a loved one. Victoria nodded. Yes. What my father and the other scattered survivors of the genocide could do, the only thing they could do, was to ensure that the same thing wouldn't happen to their children and grandchildren. For 1,000 years we built our empire anew. For 10 centuries we lived in peace, yet in fear that the Jedi will find us and do their utmost to murder us again. We sent agents in the Republic as a precaution, and do you know what we saw? We saw the Jedi fighting a civil war, calling those who turned their back on the Order Sith, and both sides waging a war of extermination. We saw the atrocities committed by Malak, and we saw the Jedi exterminate those who they deemed Sith. We welcomed the few survivors from that genocide who were fortunate enough to escape in the unknown regions. You can guess what happened afterwards. Victoria closed her eyes. You saw the same happening to you all over again. The journalist whispered while people from all over the galaxy watched from the edge of their seats. The Jedi abhor attachments. They terrified of emotions. And they forever misunderstand and fear us. We learned the hard way that the long peace we enjoyed was a lie. The Jedi hadn't changed. Nor had the Republic. We believed that once they found us again, they would react the same way, with unthinking brutality, the same thing they always accused us of. Zash sighed sadly. So you prepared for centuries, and then, when you were ready? Victoria asked a leading question. We are what the Jedi made us. We decided that their obsession with our extermination had to end, on our terms. And the Republic? This time Zash's smile was different. Colder. Deadly. They did a great job worming their way into its very heart. For thousands upon thousands of years, the Jedi used the Republic as a shield. No one could strike at them without waging war against the Republic as a whole and setting the galaxy on fire. The galaxy is a complicated place. Even when you act with the best of intentions, there are many unintended consequences. After what happened recently, there are few who would believe that General Vale ever had good intentions. Victoria countered. He did such a monstrous things. That he did. Zash graciously agreed. So did the Separatists. Did you forget Naboo? Their plans to enslave everyone on Ryloth and sell those people to the Hutts? Not to mention everything that they did in the Rim that we barely heard of here in the core, because it was and still is out of sight and out of mind. The Separatists are clearly not innocent. They did commit grave war crimes, no one will dispute that, Halcyon said. Yet, does that excuse his actions? What actions are these? What my former apprentice did, it was monstrous, yes. Camino, Sullust, Bothoi. The first, that was on the heads of the old Republic madmen as much as it on his. Sullust? Military targets. People die in war, Miss Halcyon. Innocent people, by their billions. This is the reality of our existence. Of a war spanning the galaxy. It is such a terrible, tragic waste, yet. That is the price for victory, for survival. We aren't fighting reasonable people. This isn't a mere conflict over credits or resources. No matter what they profess, the Separatists are fighting for one simple thing, power. They want to control the galaxy, otherwise they would have negotiated in good faith. Before they launched their grand offensive, the Confederacy could have done so from a position of power. The same could have happened after the fall of Corellia. Yet, here we are, the galaxy burns, as we speak good people fight and die upon thousands of worlds scattered across hundreds of sectors. Was that an excuse or an explanation? Victoria inquired. My apprentice isn't here to defend his actions. I do know him better than most, and it falls upon me to do it now, Zash said. Now, that he is gone? You all call him a monster. A typical Sith obsessed with vengeance and destruction. Are you all blind? Zash accused. He was the first Sith in millennia to leave behind the endless conflict between our people. He offered his hand in friendship to the Jedi and the Republic. Fought and bled in your war. He saved the very Senate that was later hell-bent on demonizing him. He saved countless people from slavery at Ryloth. It was him who bought the Republic precious time with his victory above Geonosis. It was Delcatar Vale who saved the whole galaxy from that abomination, Crimson. Until the very end, he fought in the Mid-Rim to protect people he knew hated him for who he was and what he stood for. The moons he burned at Sullust. He did it for the Mandalorian people and the Republic, so the Separatists could throw less material at us all. What he did at Bothawui, what he sacrificed for us all. We all saw him burning again and again to give his fleet time to escape the Bothans' betrayal. We saw him scream in agony to prove that treason would never prosper. I could feel his agony through the Force as his flesh melted from his bones. Zash paused and took a deep, calming breath. When she spoke again, her words rang with power and her eyes blazed orange. As a newly instated general of the Republic Grand Army, I can promise our enemies that I would anything it takes to bring this war to a swift and decisive conclusion. RK equals. The broadcast returned to the galaxy at War Studio and Borsk, who got caught on camera nodding thoughtfully. Victoria took this interview early this morning and just beamed it to us a few minutes ago. Vidurs continued. It revealed some startling facts and raised a lot of good questions about the past, questions we believed answered a long time ago. We at GNN will dig in and do our utmost to bring you the truth, both about the war we are all fighting and the past that led up to it, that much I can promise you all. RK equals. Part 9. RK equals. Ambassador Suite. Mandalorian Embassy. Coruscant. 5 people gathered in Satine's living room. Ahsoka was laid on one of the couches, still sleeping off the latest stunt that Mandalore unleashed upon the galaxy. As if Sullust wasn't bad enough. Her sister laid on her side on the other couch, recovering from what was hopefully the last round of operations to turn her into a combat cyborg. Satine gave Bo an exasperated look, that she blithely ignored. Next was her husband. He was sitting in an armchair, uncharacteristically nursing a drink, and finally, a perky Sith Lord hovered protectively above the young Togruta. You can see it now, can't you? Zash asked kindly. Why the Republic died. Satine looked away from her sister and frowned at the Sith. She knew the woman was playing her, working on an agenda of her own. It was working too. While an outsider to the core politics and how the Republic was really run, she had been in politics for long enough to know how the game was played. She knew that certain facts were never stated openly, and when that was inevitable, their true importance understated as a matter of course. To the average citizen, the Republic was one happy family. It was the policy that had been ruling the galaxy for as long as almost everyone could remember. Like all the best lies, this one held more than a grain of truth. Now that she was the Chancellor of a Republic gone in all but name, Satine understood. Any senator or government official who gave a damn about their homeworld and people had a choice to make. Sometimes it was simple: what was best for their people aligned with the interests of the Republic, or at least protecting its interests would be the best one could do to safeguard what was precious to them. At other times, yes, dear. I know. Zash nodded benevolently as if reading her thoughts. Which she might be actually able to do. Damn Sith. We're here to prove all my sister's detractors right. Bo grumbled morosely. Let's get to it. All that double talk and innuendos gives me a headache. Zash gave her a flat look. That's the hangover and implants. Bo acted very maturely and gave the lightly deranged Sith a one-finger salute. I see why Delcatar likes you. You've got spunk. Zash happily nodded to herself. Speaking of my idiot of a husband. Bo looked expectantly at the Sith. He's most likely dead, however I've got it on good authority he had the tools to get better. It's another question if he'll manage to pull it off this time. Anyway, we're here burdened with a glorious purpose. It's plotting time. Bo threw her fellow Reed head a venomous look that made Zash smirk. Why all Sith had to be either insane, murderous maniacs, or both? Strictly speaking, it was Kuat and some other powerful Republic members that betrayed the Republic first. We're left to take the blame and pick up the pieces. Obi-Wan raised a good point. It was just a few hours ago that he finally saw the politics making the Republic possible in the first place for what they really were, and the logical implications hit him hard. The line between business as usual, doing what was best for your own people, and treason could be thin and blurry at the best of times. What Kuat and most other powerful players in the Republic did could easily be passed as the first two. The problem was that it could easily be the latter two, and no one could really prove it. Did Kuat held back their fleets to protect their people and industry? Did they do it just to let Corellia, their biggest rival, fall? Or perhaps so the Republic could get near collapse, and so they could emerge as the undisputed power in the core and thus the galaxy? The truth was probably something in the middle. Probably. The revelation that Obi-Wan got could very much be the truth too. From the point of view of a former Jedi, who was sworn to protect the Republic, seeing Kuat's actions as treason could be easy once he opened his eyes. After all, he did choose to do his best to protect Mandalore and their people, thus betraying the ideals of the Republic. It was the same choice that Satine made when she accepted to become a chancellor, and they weren't alone in that. Most senators and government officials had to face that dilemma multiple times during their careers. It was a small wonder that the Republic functioned as well as it did to begin with. Or perhaps it wasn't. From what Satine figured out, when the Republic worked, it was more often than not either due to a powerful chancellor who was able to force the Senate into action, because enough of the major powers aligned to push through an agenda, or thanks to backstage deals that then got worked through the Senate. At least for the time being, Satine didn't have to worry about that. Between dead members and corruption investigations, the Senate was the closest to irrelevance it had ever been. Besides, she wasn't elected by it but by a clique of powerful local governments who expected her to protect their interests and prosecute the war to an acceptable conclusion, in that order. Her prize was the capability to help her people, eventually. One of the things Obi-Wan had been busy with, besides arranging the liberation of Corellia, was an expeditionary force to lift the siege of their home. The Bothan's treason threatened it all. A pillow hit Satine's head, startling her out of her thoughts. "Pay attention," Bo hissed angrily. "My husband knew what would happen when he brought his fleet to Bothawoi. He wasn't surprised by their betrayal. What he did it for us, for our people. He chose to burn, in order to make an example of the Bothans and warn us about their betrayal. You are the Chancellor of this damned Republic, but first, you are a Mandalorian, and you will make damn sure Mandalore's sacrifice wasn't in vain." Bo was on her feet, painting with fury and pain. "She's right, you know," Zash agreed. "Of course she would, that maniac was her apprentice. Probably she was at fault he turned that way too." "Don't give me that look, girl, show some steel." Without his warning, the Bothan agents could have lit the whole core on fire without you being the wiser. He could have waned us another way, just as he showed himself here earlier, Satine snapped. "Actually, he probably couldn't, not without a beacon to anchor him. If I hadn't summoned him, I doubt he would have even attempted projecting his consciousness all the way here. The power required is tremendous and the Force isn't what it used to be." Zash countered. "What do you mean?" Obi-Wan asked. "Ever since Delkatar rescued me from Tython, I've noticed that it takes significantly more power to do the simplest of things. Figuring out what's wrong is on my to-do list," Zash explained unhelpfully. Satine stared at the Sith at the implications of that simple statement. What could Zash or Vale for that matter do if they didn't need to use more energy for anything related with the Force? "You never paid much attention to the old histories, sister," Bo chuckled. "Do you know why our people always allied with the Sith in the past? Because they were power incarnate and didn't shy of using it. They were worthy allies, even though a great many of them were utter bastards." Bo looked at the resident Sith. "You're going to use the gift my husband offered us all, aren't you? I watched your interview." "I will keep the core worlds in line." Zash nodded. You won't have to disband the force meant to secure Mandalore to keep an eye of unreliable elements. How do you intend to do that? Satine was afraid to ask. The plan you and Obi-Wan came with was awfully vague. In fact, one of the reasons we're here is to ensure we're all on the same page. I was suddenly struck by the need to go visit Kuat and have a heart-to-heart chat with Anara Kuat. Zash smiled. In person. Satine groaned. We can't afford to have Kuat antagonistic, much less as enemies. Don't worry about them. I am worried. Obi-Wan stated flatly. If we have to fight them, what we have left if we win will be swept away trivially by the separatists. If they simply go neutral, we will lose the war inside a year. 2 on the outside if we manage to pull off a few miracles. And if they switch sides? He didn't have to extrapolate. As I said, I'll handle Kuat. What you need to worry about is the political fallout of, well, everything. You already agreed that the Republic no longer served your purposes when you laid the groundwork to sideline the Senate. Now it's time to decide how to lead that to its ultimate conclusion. We win the war and go back home? Obi-Wan asked. We'll have to continue the charade until then. And you were just beginning to show some promise. Zash shook her head sadly. Think, Jedi, think. Half the galaxy, and I don't include the separatists, see us as the architects of everything that's wrong, Sith and Mandalorians alike. We don't get to quietly retire once the Confederacy is handled. The Republic is already fractured with successor states cropping up. That trend is going to get worse before it could get better if it does at all. As she spoke, Zash became all business. They were no longer listening to the flirty temptress she tried to present herself with. Now, seeing her sheer presence, there was no mistaking her for anything but a woman accustomed to power. A great many people already see us as threats that must be removed. They fear us, and before we're done, they will have more reasons to. You're talking about ending the Republic and replacing it. Bo spoke of it first. With an empire that was left unsaid yet everyone heard it. Obi-Wan gave the Sith a long, hard look, before he averted his eyes and stared at Satine with tender, pain-filled eyes. What's one more treason after all the others? He sighed. Kenobi, the Republic you swore to protect and believed in, it never existed in the first place. Zash spoke kindly. I finally figured that out, thank you very much. Her husband spoke in a sarcastic tone. That only makes it worse. He added morosely. To think that I looked at the Republic as potential saviors and an example to live up to. Satine muttered. Her words made Bo snort in amusement, but thankfully her sister didn't comment otherwise. Popular support. Delcatar's deed at Bothoi would have fired up every Mandalorian warrior worth their name. As loath I am to admit it, we need more. Bo suggested. Good girl. Zash nodded in approval. I've already planted some seeds with my interview. In the weeks to come, we'll all be making a lot of public appearances and speeches, offering deals, making treats, offering economic support and using every little dirty trick in the book. However, what we need and lack is simple to inspire and a cause our followers can get behind. Later, if anyone asked her, Satine could honestly say that she knew exactly when the dream of the Republic died. Where to? In her living room, during a plotting session with her husband, sister and a cheerful Sith. =RK=. Much later, the sisters got a bit of time to speak privately. Obi-Wan had to go back to Gar HQ and the war and Zash continued to hover over Ahsoka. She had chosen the poor girl as her new apprentice and was hellbent on ensure she recovered. This was the first time Satine and Bo had for themselves after Vale burned along with Bothoi. She cursed the burden of her office, which had to come before her own family. The fallout of the Bothans' treason ensured that she had to use every moment of the past few days preventing the Republic from imploding, again. How are you, really? Satine asked after she dragged her sister in one of the bedrooms and pushed her to sit on the bed, then jumped next to her. I saw my husband burn. And half the bloody Republic cheered his death as if it was the best thing that happened to them, Bo snapped. The other half were infuriated by the traitors and supportive of our people, of you. Satine gently pointed out. Her sister cursed colorfully. It was supposed to be just a marriage of convenience and politics, you know. Bo muttered. I'm well aware. Yet. He was everything I imagined I wanted as a girl. A powerful, famous warrior, who went to become Mandalore, even. He wasn't too bad in bed either, her. Satine smirked. There's something true to that saying about older men and experience. Satine wisely didn't mention that Bo had been very experienced in that department too, long before Vale appeared. As the ruling Duchess of Mandalore, she had kept as close tabs on her sister as she could. Despite their falling out, Bo-Katan was the only family she had left after the Civil War. You aren't pissed off just because you lost on a great sex. You fell for him for real, didn't you? I know you were becoming fonder and fonder of him before he left to deal with Crimson. Satine spoke quietly. I do care for him, all right. I don't know if it is really love or just the fact that I love the fact that I'm married to Mandalore. I haven't been the best when emotions are concerned, Bo sighed. I miss him, you know. She glared at Satine, though there was no heat in her eyes. There are so many things that were left unsaid, and now. We saw him die. If Sash is to be believed, he might get better. She apparently did. Satine didn't know how to feel about that at all. On one hand, Vale surviving might be good for her sister. On the other, that would be a colossal problem for her, not to mention that when was said and done, she wasn't sure if Bo wasn't better off as a widow. Her husband was a bloody Sith after all. Of Masters and Apprentices, RK equals, Part 1, RK equals, Kuat of Kuat residence, Kuat. Kuat looked over the world that was his legacy through windows twice as tall as he was that covered a whole wall of his suite. The view was stunning as it should be. His home was close to the top floor of a space scraper that came close to touching the upper edge of the atmosphere. Gleaming canyons made of metal and glass, rivers of flying vehicles. It was magnificent, and it was untouched by war. For the young man, who was the heir of Kuat, his whole world was a symbol of the duty he had to his people, a duty that trumped the bounds of family. His soft aristocratic features twisted in a scowl at the very thought. The House of Kuat, it was meant to be the protectors of their world, the whole star system and even the sector, yet, somewhere along the way, his relatives lost sight of that goal. Too many of them saw themselves as peerless, as those who the people had to serve just of the family name they were born to. His aunt, Anara, the current director, was a prime example of that trend. Kuat turned his gaze away from the beautiful cityscape and looked back down to the datapad in his hands. Finally, after years of digging, making deals and seeking the like-minded people within the family, he had what he needed to cut out the tumor that twisted their house, yet he wasn't sure he dared use it at a time the Republic was on the precipice of annihilation. He browsed through the files, bribes, both taken and given, blackmail and most damningly, treason. Kuat watched the recording again, marveling that Anara dared speak the words aloud. He wasn't sure how his friend managed to get this recording out of the woman's secure office, and to be honest, he didn't care. Once he was sure that it was the genuine article, that was all that mattered. This was what he had been working for ever since he was a young teen and saw his family for what it really was, a bunch of self-centered bastards who would eagerly sell the whole galaxy for profit and power. You have nothing to worry about, Admiral, CEO Harrington. I didn't let Corellian system fall just to ride to their rescue now. What is left of the Republic can pay the price for liberating them. We will sell them all the ships, material and support they can pay for, and when the dust settles, our position would be unchallenged. Anara's own tongue damned her. Yet, did he dare use this? He could certainly prove that what many in the media accused his house was true. However, the consequences of revealing it. He rubbed his forehead. Kuat was not blind. He knew that there would be many on his world who would support Anara if he went public. She could claim that she did what she believed best for Kuat, for them, and damn the consequences. Hells, His aunt might even believe it. Certainly she wouldn't be the first Kuat who knew that what was best for them had to certainly be best or at least good enough for the rest of the Kuati. He had to handle this carefully. There had to be a way to excise the rot that took hold of his house and perhaps do it in such a way that wouldn't doom the Republic. Kuat needed advice and he knew just who to speak with. Ziva, patch me through to Admiral Livingston. If he is currently unavailable, arrange a quiet meeting. The young heir called his secretary. If anyone knew how to handle the treasonous behavior of his aunt, quietly mind you, that would be Jonas Livingston. With that taken care of, Kuat returned his attention to the long list of bribed and blackmailed people. Some needed to be removed from their positions, others could prove to be valuable allies in the months to come. He had to contact them covertly. His chief of security should be able to handle that, surely. Kuat glanced at his antique wooden desk and frowned. Ziva? He asked aloud and again no answer came. That wasn't like her. Ziva Noyat was possibly the best paid personal assistant in the whole sector as she earned every credit with hard and excellent work. Ziva? Kuat repeated. When the silence from his desk continued, he raised his left hand and the comm unit carefully hidden in a decorative bracelet that was a gift from one of his younger cousins. Kevin, do we have a problem? He addressed his chief of security. The comm remained silent. Now, Kuat began to feel nervous. Did his aunt figure out what he possessed? Did she have his security compromised? He got up and all but ran to his desk where he had hidden a pair of hold-off blasters, a gift from his late father for just such a case. He got the weapons out and hit the panic button built into the desk for good measure. There were no alarms, no shields coming online, no Durasteel shutters slamming to cover the windows. Nothing. It's of no use, child. A female voice echoed around the large office. Kuat dived behind his desk, which was incidentally reinforced with ship-grade armor below the ancient wood. Did Anara send you? He asked, playing for time. In a matter of speaking. Don't worry, she is my next stop, the woman said. Kuat was sure she was cloaked, though her voice came from somewhere in front of his desk. At least the assassin wanted to play games instead of taking him out while he was unsuspecting, and that was a chance he couldn't afford to waste. The heir kicked a certain panel, which should have activated automatic defenses programmed to shred anything but a few pre-designated people, like him. A brief electronic whine came from the floor and ceiling, however the masked turrets didn't come out of their cradles. Not good. Kuat muttered and blindly opened fire while keeping himself covered by the desk. I can pay you. Triple what Anara offered. Black smoke popped behind his desk and suddenly there was a not particularly tall figure standing above him. Kuat moved as fast as he could in a frantic attempt to aim at the assassin, however before he could point his blasters as the woman an invisible hand grasped him and hauled him up until he floated just above his desk. The same power twisted his arms and hands until he pointed his own weapons at his neck. I can assure you, child, you will be paying me for my time. The figure became more substantial as if a hologram made of smoke turned into flesh and bone in front of his eyes, and a red-haired woman who looked just a bit younger than his aunt stood before him. She smiled pleasantly at him. A dazzling sense of motion followed and Kuat found himself seated in his sinfully comfortable chair. A swish of smoke followed and the woman was sat on top of his desk surrounded by a quickly evaporating halo of that same black smoke that heralded her first appearance. She had a datapad in hand, his datapad, and was looking at the screen. I can use this. She happily nodded to herself. Kuat of Kuat, her eyes sparkled in amusement. You're going to tell me all your deep, dark secrets, then you are going to make some transactions and kill a few people. I will do no such thing. Kuat snarled despite the fear spreading from the pit of his stomach. You wouldn't? The woman was smiling at him mischievously. Her lips didn't move, yet he heard her clear as a day, in his head. What makes you think you have a choice, child? The Jedi you so admire made it so I have no choice but come out and play, and there will be a hell to pay. Now tell me, who are your closest confidants? Who knows about this intelligence windfall? She waved the datapad. Kuat glared defiantly. I do so love when they think they have a chance. The woman whispered. Her face changed, it became older, marred by deep wrinkles. The veins under her skin became more and more pronounced until they looked like cracks into her face that pulsed with black ichor. And her eyes, they were two bottomless pits of malice and hatred. Something cold and unyielding brushed against Kuat's mind. It probed and prodded all the while the woman continued to speak right into his head. I do wonder, who do you hold most dear? Who you can't bear to see harmed? Visions of inhuman torture of men, women and children flashed in front of his eyes. And he knew them all, friends and family. All he could hear was their screams and pleas that he made the pain stop. Kuat screamed and then the nightmare changed. He stood in front of the windows of his office and watched his beloved homeworld burn. His own screams joined those of the tortured innocents for what felt like forever, until his mind could no longer handle the horror and he blanked out. Kuat came to with a start and looked wildly around his office. Such a nightmare. He froze and then tried to crawl into his chair. The woman-shaped monster sat on his desk and Ziva was right beside her, offering her a cup of steaming tea. The horror took up the offering, winked at him and brushed a finger down the side of the younger woman's face. Ziva's skin lost its color and became like that of a mummy. She had just a moment to scream in pain before she turned in little more than a bag of leathery skin and bones held together by her designer dress. The monster sipped her tea, sighed in content and smiled at him. Kuat blacked again and when he awoke, it was to yet another nightmare. Make it stop, please. He begged the next time he saw the monster. Why would I do that, child? I'll do anything, I swear. Kuat vowed. She gave him a terrifying smile and waved him to come closer. =RK=, Part 2, =RK=, Blue Conference Room, Kuat Drive Yards HQ, Kuat. Light blue wood panels covered curved walls and were in turn half hidden by crawling azure plants that glowed with bright azure light. Everything, from the tastefully chosen furniture to the shape of the room, was carefully chosen in order to put members of dozens of species at ease, just like multiple similar places within the various KDY offices across the galaxy. It made both negotiations with clients and rivals as well as meetings between employees much easier and productive. Today, Anara Kuat met with various directors who ran the shipyards and logistics spread out throughout the Kuat system in order to get a more hands-on update on how their work for the Republic was going on. Naturally, no one mentioned that for most intents and purposes the Republic was already gone and that it was KDY that played a key role in that happening, though everyone present strongly suspected it, though only a few of them knew that for a fact. As you know, after the separatist attack, we lost almost 20% of the expanded shipyards and industry, primarily due to lack of time to properly fortify the new sites combined with the sheer number of ships the enemy sent at us. The director overseeing said shipyard said, "We've already restored 70% of the losses, in no small part thanks to resources provided by the Republic," he said with a straight face. It wasn't like there was a more important industrial system left to the Republic after the fall of Corellia, which simply made Kuat indispensable and got them absolute priority as far as resources and military protection were concerned, not to mention the fact that their already significant political power rose sharply and all Anara had to do achieve it was to keep their fleet home. We estimate that in a month, perhaps 40 to 45 days, we'll have our industry equal the pre-attack levels. Unfortunately, due to resource shortages, we'll be unable to facilitate further expansion even though we'll soon have a new batch of trained workers for such an effort. We'll do it once the Republic pushes the separatists back and re-establishes control over the rest of the core. Meanwhile, some of those people will be quite useful in rebuilding recovered star systems, Anara said. For substantial fee that would further increase KDY's revenues, of course. What is the status of the new construction? We have about 100 block Ivanotas that began construction a few months ago and about 70 of the older pattern acclimators. For the expanded construction cycle, we've got 200 Block 2 cruisers and half that number of assault ships. We're still expanding Victory construction as well as conducting tests on the Imperator project. We do have the Mandator 2's construction proceeding apace. The bottleneck in resources and completed parts after the unpleasantries on Coruscant means we're practically 20% behind schedule in our Republic capital ship contracts. Construction of lighter ships is actually 10% ahead of what was projected, thanks to salvaged equipment after the battle. We did the same for the heavy ships, however that wasn't enough to offset the losses in industry, so there we're still behind. Naturally, salvaged enemy equipment wasn't really compatible for our designs and usually had to reprocess it before using it. So far everything was more or less as the reports indicated, which was good. Anara hated surprises, they were seldom pleasant ones. What is our resource and logistics situation? She turned to another director when she heard everything she needed to know about the shipyard's operations. Not as good as we wish, though better than we feared, all things considered. A long-winded, though important explanation about resource acquisition and allocation followed. It was boring yet not something Anara could afford to skip. All the industry in the galaxy wouldn't help Kuat if they lacked the resources to fuel it. An incoming call interrupted the meeting. Anara frowned at her comm. Her people knew better than to disturb her when she met a significant number of the most important officers within the corporation. Whatever it was important and likely not good news. She activated a privacy field and received the call. Director Kuat, I've got Captain Gerd Golian from KDY Security. He needs to talk with you about your nephew and claims it could not wait. Anara's assistant reported briskly. Put him on. What did that boy do this time? He had been a thorn in her side for years now. Didn't he understand that family came first? Director Kuat, Captain Golian. I regret to inform you that half an hour ago, Kuat of Kuat had a mental breakdown. He shot his chief of security and personal assistant before turning his blasters upon himself. We do have the whole accident on recording, but despite that we're currently investigating for foul play as per procedure. I beseech you to increase your own security just in case. What are my orders, ma'am? The Rhodian security officer reported. Anara stared at her comm for a few long seconds while her mind struggled to process the information. Snapping and shooting people? That didn't sound like her nephew. If she ever wanted to remove him by arranging a very final accident, that wouldn't be how she would do it. It was so out of character that, recording or not, Anara didn't buy it was an accident. Investigate. She ordered. The building is locked down, I presume? Along with the whole sector of the city. Golian confirmed. I don't believe this was an accident. Find out what happened, Captain, then report to me. I've got my best forensics specialists on the case as well as people dissecting both the recording and the security systems. If there was foul play, we'll figure it out and find the responsible party, ma'am. Good. Do send me that recording. Anara ordered and cut off the call. Berry, clear the next hour or two from any meetings I have, either cancel or reschedule. She took down the privacy field, finished listening to the logistics situation and then cut the meeting short and dismissed the other directors. Only after they left, she checked her terminal for the recording, which was in and screened for more layer, then proceeded to watch it. =RK=. Ever since she awoke within the Mandalorian embassy a few days ago, Ahsoka couldn't stop feeling chills and nothing could really properly warm her up. It didn't take her long to figure out what it was. Her mind was open to the dark side. She could feel cold anger through her very connection with the Force, and it was all Vale's fault. Whatever he did at Bothoi, the backslash damaged her. Ahsoka's emotional control was all but gone, and with anger being her constant companion, she was not fit to command. She still didn't know how exactly she got bundled up as an apprentice to their other resident Sith. However, it was unfortunately true that Zash was possibly the best person to help her handle her issues with the dark side. After all, no matter how scary, it wasn't like the woman was insane, right? That belief lasted until they got to Kuat and the crazy Sith took her along when she went out to break a few dozen laws, commit torture, murder and what could be considered an act of war, all the while she had a great deal of fun. Actually, that was the worst. Whatever happened, Ahsoka found herself intimately connected not only with the dark side but with Zash. She could clearly experience everything the Sith felt, and that. A very different chill ran up and down the Togruta's spine. When Zash tortured, or as she put it, interrogated, Kuat of Kuat, the woman experienced almost sexual pleasure from the act of dominance and the man's anguish. Ahsoka felt it all, and not so small, treasonous part of her mind, enjoyed it as well. Ever since what happened in the R&D facility, she hadn't felt more alive than at that moment. Even now, a few hours later, Zash's lessons still rang clearly in Ahsoka's mind. Suppressing your emotions is counterproductive, apprentice. Revel in them, use them, however do not let them use you. Zash smiled gently at her. I'll tell you a little secret on how to keep yourself sane. From time to time, you need to let loose, to feed the dark side and all those wicked desires that she makes you enjoy. I'll advise you that when possible, you do it in a constructive manner. She waved at the whimpering form of Kuat. Ahsoka stared at the broken man, at how he spilled every secret he had, and while a part of her loathed what was happening, there was another piece of her psyche that sneered at the self-righteousness instilled in her by the Jedi. Is it worse to break and kill a few men, if that can prevent the deaths of millions? Zash asked. Look at him. She pointed at Kuat. He has the best of intentions, his people's interests in mind. However, if we let him do what is best for them, what is left from the Republic will pay the price. Tell me, Ahsoka, what a Jedi would do and who doing so would serve best? It was at that moment that Ahsoka began to comprehend how insidious Zash truly was. The woman could twist even the worst of acts and show them in a light that the former Jedi could help but agree that they served a greater purpose. And if committing said acts felt oh so good, well, that was just a nice bonus, wasn't it? Who knew that the path to the dark side could be so slippery and enjoyable? Even the fact that the Jedi part of her hated everything that Zash was doing, that she wasn't acting to strike down the Sith, that internal disconnect and self-hatred, merely fed the dark side. A light nudge through the Force pulled Ahsoka out of her thoughts. She saw the last director walking out of the conference room, and she followed Zash's cloaked form in slipping inside. The door slid closed behind them and left them alone with their quarry. They were going to twist and turn another person, another despicable act, yet, what choice did they have? Without Kuat, the galaxy would fall to the Separatists and the Dark Jedi allied to them. Even worse, thanks to Kuat of Kuat, they now had proof that Anara and KDY betrayed the Republic for their own gain. And that was enough to anger Ahsoka enough that she found it hard to care what would happen to them. This wasn't what a Jedi should ever do or think. But she wasn't just a Jedi any longer. She was a soldier too, one sworn to protect the Republic and, more importantly, its people, and Anara betrayed them all. Millions, perhaps billions, died thanks to Anara's actions, and Ahsoka couldn't help but hate her for that. Zash floated a datapad in front of the traitor and let it fall to the wooden table with a loud clatter that startled the woman. Anara jumped from her seat and turned around in fright. Her eyes widened comically when she saw them bring down the Force-based cloak that made them invisible to both people and sensors. You've been a naughty girl, my dear. Zash chided lightly. Read. The voice broke no argument. Anara flinched at the tone, her fear spiked and all color drained from her face. Their quarry was by no means stupid. Untrustworthy, corrupt, murderous and treacherous? Sure. Stupid? No. Ahsoka simply couldn't help it but reveled in watching Anara connect the dots. If Zash had the timing right, Kuat should have just received the news of her nephew's death. Their mere presence was enough for her to figure out exactly what happened and what was their previous stop. Anara's fear was delicious, and Ahsoka hated herself for savoring as if it was the best thing she ever tasted. She was actually looking up to what came next, and even worse, she was thankful when Zash sent her a nudge of approval and reassurance through their weird bond. Treason, my dear, it never prospers, for when it does so no one any longer dares call it such. Yours won't prosper. Zash began. Her voice had a weird lilt to it, It was darkly seductive, and a surge of heat shot through Ahsoka's body, and that was just an echo of the power leveled at the Qati woman, who recoiled back into her chair. It took the Togruta a few moments to figure out that those words weren't actually said aloud, yet Anara did hear them too. Her emotions confirmed it. "My condolences." The tone subtly shifted into something that resembled a funeral dirge. "Senator Danu perished during the traitor's attack upon the Senate. It must be a grave blow to lose your nephew so soon after the demise of your dear friend." The message was sent. The Chancellor and her allies upheld their part of the bargain. Danu was no longer a problem. The same was true for the man behind him, Kuat of Kuat, and after interrogating the young man, they knew who his allies were, among other things. One way or another, they would cease to be a problem, soon. Ahsoka flinched at that thought. Most of them were good men, patriots, yet she just thought of them as mere obstacles that had to be disposed of and she swallowed a lump that formed in her throat. That course of action could be the best for the galaxy as a whole. If a few good men had to be sacrificed to more easily keep Kuat in check, then so be it. It made sense. It was the obvious choice and not one that a Jedi should be even think of pursuing. But Ahsoka was no longer a Jedi, was she? What was she, anyway? "My precious little apprentice, of course." Zash's amused voice sounded in her mind, and it spread warmth through her heart that pushed the chill of the dark side away for a moment. "Now pay attention. Anara, do you know why this kind of war would have never happened back in the Empire?" Zash was asked. The Qati woman was taken aback by the sudden shift in both topic and tone from the Sith. Ahsoka's master actually felt curious to hear the answer. "I'm certain I wouldn't know." Anara bit off angrily despite the terror she felt. "A group of corporations led by a single Sith Lord and his apprentices?" Zash chuckled merrily. "Even if they somehow had the third largest military in the galaxy, it would be of no use. Their fleets, their armies?" The Sith made a dismissive gesture. "Could they protect the people who run those corporations from the wrath of the Empire? What use are those when there were hundreds of Sith supporting the Empire who could simply walk through the best of defenses in order to have a heart-to-heart chat with the CEOs in charge of those corporations? Just as Zash and Ahsoka did today. They first slipped through the best security KDY had, interrogated Kuat of Kuat in his own office, then arranged him to have a mental breakdown and shoot himself. Just as they simply walked to speak with Anara herself. "What do you want?" the traitor asked. Zash's cheerful smile terrified Anara, and Ahsoka loved every last moment of it. "We are going to have a long and productive conversation, my sweet child. Ahsoka, be a dear and clear Anara's schedule for the next few days. She'll be in mourning for the nephew she loved so much." By the time they were done with Kuat, the woman would be their creature. Ahsoka shivered in both anticipation and revulsion.